Okay, so I think some of you have been to these before. We're trying to do these sort of every month as a bit of a Lectora product support session, just covering little topics that we either found interesting or thought were important. Sometimes it's new little features that have popped up or something we've seen people having a couple issues with. If you haven't been before or don't know me, I'm Will, a Learning Technology Manager. I do all our sort of dev and support and training and all that sort of stuff. So I think most of you know me already, but if not, yeah, I've also got Michael here.
Hello.
Introduce yourself if you want.
Project manager, support, whatever you need me for, I'm here.
Yeah, all good.
Thanks for joining, everyone. I think Will and I were just discussing before this that we might start putting these recordings up so that people can access them afterwards. Luke, I know that was a question of yours, and I thought I'd address it in here, just because we understand that everyone can't make it at the exact time that we've got. I think we had over 20 people register for today, and not everyone will be able to make it. So we're going to start putting these up live. We'll clean them up a bit and put them live so those that can't make it can actually view them. But the main thing is we still need you guys to turn up and actually tell us some support issues that you need help with so we can show them. So please don't all just disappear and just wait for a recording, because we really need your participation. These are for you. So in getting those little problems or niggles that you guys have would be great to show other people and make sure everyone's using the tool to their best ability.
Oh, thanks, Michael. All right, yeah, with that, we'll jump in. So I'll just click along here. So the main sort of thing we're looking at a couple different things today, but it all sort of falls under what I've got there as uncommon tips and tricks. So it's little things that people may not realize, or you may often have trouble with something and there's a simple solution you haven't sort of thought of or played with, just little fiddly things in a couple of different areas. So we'll have a look at some of those as well. So let me just go along through here, bit of an agenda. We did talk about in the last session to do with button states as well, but just covering that again and going into sort of detail, different things with adding buttons and some shortcuts there. We'll look at different sort of view modes, but mainly talking about the preview in browser there. There's a couple of things that recently have come up where that's helpful. People may not realize that it's there or what it does. Also there we've got debug mode, which is another view mode that's pretty handy when you do need it. Often people don't sort of touch it or don't know it's there. On top of that, a couple of sort of like housekeeping things or just project management things that I often talk about. So dealing with unused resources in your file, how to save a file out to a zip and sort of refresh it, and some things to do with that as well. And then another look at some development stuff there with page heights and things. I think we mentioned in one of the sessions about having scrolling pages and a couple of things that Lectora's got to do with that as well. So we can have a look at those. And there's another little fiddly support one that I had mentioned that was to do with bullet points that came up recently I wanted to cover as well. So we'll go from there up through here and starting off with button states. So just a bit of a recap just in general with button states and what we've sort of looked at recently. Lectora has had an update where they've added in a bit more control over some of these as well. So visited and selected states have been, they've been in Lectora Online for a little while, but they've been added to desktop now as an option. So you can fiddle around with those, and I'll just explain sort of what the difference is and how they're used, and a couple of different things to show there as well. You can also add your own completely new states for whatever reason, which you can manually apply or not apply. And I can show you where that is as well. And then a couple of tips just with setting up buttons and some shortcuts there and what we can do with those. So I'll leave that slide there and I'll jump over into a project that I've been playing around with. Bring that over here. So can everyone see that okay? The zoom level might be a little bit hard, but hopefully you don't need to read it. It's all dummy text anyway. So I've just set up a really quick page there, just with some clicks and reveals, pretty simple sort of common page that we might see, just to show off the button states and how they work as well. So I'll preview the page first and we'll just have a look there. Preview here. So this is just a nice simple one. I've got 3 buttons here. I'll go over all these crazy colors in a second. If I click on these, get a bit of a reveal coming up. The text itself is the same. Obviously, I can make those changes. I've just changed the heading so we can see what's going on. And you can see some colors happening here as well. So the buttons are changing states as I click through them. You may not have spotted, it was pretty quick there, but the next button also was disabled to start with, and it sort of changed its appearance after I clicked all 3 of these. So I can go through that as well. So just a nice simple page. I think that's a pretty common one people often like to do, obviously in different versions. A good way of getting more text onto one page where it's relevant without having to try and squeeze it all in. So let me jump back out here and click on one of these buttons. So click to reveal, go up to my style tab at the top. And here we have the button states. So I'll click into these. I've made these all just crazy colors to make it really obvious when they change. Obviously, you can be a bit more subtle with it and make it look however you want. The normal state I've just left as this sort of default button that I added. These are all just text buttons. So this is basically if you add a text button in a new course, that's usually what it's going to look like to start with, font-wise as well. Each of these states have the complete freedom to change style, color, outlines, opacity, all that sort of stuff. Even the text and the font and everything you can change if you want to. You obviously don't want things to look too inconsistent, but you can make the hover state bold or things like that, for example. So all of these have the options here. The normal state, just to go through what they actually are, is just what your button looks like when nothing's happened to it. It's just sitting on the page and it's not being interacted with. Moving down the list here, we've got your over state, which is also called the hover state. So when your mouse hovers over the button, it's going to change to that state. We often like to have a different color there to make it obvious that a button is something interactive, and that's pretty common in websites and e-learning already and things like that as well. Pretty common to see that as well. Within Lectora, with these different styles and colors and things like that, it will do a default option for you where it will change the overstate slightly. It'll just be a slightly different color for whatever you chose at the start. If you leave that default on, if I change it back here, it's called the sort of auto state. So it's basically just made that a slightly darker or lighter blue based on this first sort of really dark gray blue. You may not even be able to see the difference, which is why I've made it a bit brighter as well. So for each of these states, they'll start out like all blanked out like this, and they've got the auto set on. So if you want to turn that off, I just click this button, it becomes custom, and then I can change things like the color, like I said, the outline, all that sort of stuff you can play around with. Also, in this first little section here for each of these states, you've got what the initial state is and whether that state's enabled. So for everything other than the normal state, you can actually turn them off so they don't exist. Things like the visited state and selected state, if they're not useful, if you're not needing to use those, you can turn those off. If you're not choosing to disable the button for any reason, you can just turn it off if you don't want it on there. But more so, you need to know to turn this on if you do want to use them. So some of them start ticked and some start unticked as well. Initial state is just what that button's going to start as on the screen. So normally the normal state is going to be what's used here. Often you'll see the disabled state, maybe the initial state, if you've got something, for example, like your next button that's not going to activate until something's happened on the page. The initial state for that would be the disabled state as well. So moving down through these again, a couple more people jumping in here. Yep. So the over state, you've also got the down state, which is a funny one. It's often missed, but it's only appears when you're actively clicking on the button. So if you click and hold a button, you'll see the down state. It's normally meant to be seen only as like a flash. Back in the old sort of designs, the down states were sort of made to look as if the button was actually pressing in, so they'd have an outline and that gave, or a shadow or something, and that gave the effect as if you were clicking the button into the screen. Now they're just there as a little sort of flash for interaction, so you know you've clicked it, and it's different from the hover state in that way. Disabled, we've gone through a little bit. The only difference here is that the disabled button can't be clicked on. It won't hover, it won't do anything. It's just sort of inactive and visibly so as well. Usually the common thing you'll see there is like a opacity change where it's sort of transparent or faded, so it sort of looks like the button's like dead or inactive as well. Visited and selected states are sort of speak for themselves a little bit. It's something that was we used to have to do sort of long way around before. Visited means it's been clicked before. Selected is the one that's last been clicked. It works a little differently in Lectora here, where they sort of alternate as you click through, but if you leave the page and come back, the buttons that have been clicked before will revert to the visited state instead of the normal state. So that's the main thing there. Selected is while you're on the page. Visited is for when you've left the page and come back, so you know you've clicked certain buttons as well. So again, I've made all these pretty obvious colors. All of them are ticked and enabled. All of them have got different sort of style happening. And that's basically what I've set up there. So different things like that. You can do those with all kinds of buttons, so not just text buttons. If it's an image style button, you can have a different graphic for each of those. Obviously, different types of buttons are going to work differently as well. But those are basically how you control your states. So as we saw there, I'll just preview again, just to show what they're actually doing. as I'm hovering over, I'm not clicking anything. I've got my green coming up. Again, you'll see that disabled state coming up here for this one. It's actually changed color and I can't click on it. If I click on one of these buttons, you might have seen that flash of red there. I'll hold the next one to make it a bit more obvious. You can see it goes red as it's being clicked. And then you can see the alternating come up here as well. So as I click each one, it's gone orange. If I click them again, it's changing to that visited state. So on the same page, it's a little bit weird where it alternates, but if I leave the page and come back, they'll all go back to purple, which means they've been visited. So obviously keeping that consistent throughout your course makes more sense for everyone as well. Yeah, that's kind of what we got for button states. Just to do with buttons in general, I did have a couple of points there on setting up buttons quickly or editing buttons as well. A really good tip with states and things like that, if you decide you need to change all the states, it's kind of a pain to go in and grab each button, go style. You can't do them en masse, so you can't sort of go in and say, I'll change all these ones to their visited state to green or whatever it needs to change to. But what you can do is make a change to one button, and then you can use what's called the style painter, which is traditionally normally used for text, where you have something selected, click on the style painter, you click something else and it changes to match that same formatting. This actually works really well for buttons. So if you've got a certain button selected and I've changed the states, it's going to actually adhere to those as well. So if I go in here and change my green hover state to maybe like a blue or something here, I don't want to have to go and do that individually for all three of these buttons. So I can just go home, style painter, making sure I've got my sort of source style selected, style painter, click the next one, and do it again for the third one. And in one click, I've basically changed all those to that blue effect instead. If I go to my style, it's applied that across. So it's really good if you've already set them up and you're going back and changing it, or if you're working with a different template and you want to go through and change things like that. The style painter is really good for, yeah, obviously text headings, things like that, but also for buttons because it's big time saver with those states as well. So that's sort of that little, now that there's 6 states to work with, if you want to change all them individually for say 10 buttons on a screen, that's a huge pain. So Style Painter will save your life there as well. I think that was all I wanted to cover on button states. Let me just bring back that screen there. Oh, sorry, I've also got state conditions, which I can explain as well. So that's only just come in with these new state options. Basically, you can have conditions on an action based on the state of a button, which seems simple, but it's actually a big time saver with something like this. So the way this page is working, I'm revealing my next button after I've clicked all 3 buttons. Normally I'd have to set up like a variable to cover that, to match that as well. But what I've actually done here, I pop this open on my first button. I'm going to go up to my action tab. It's disabling the button. I'm doing it sort of backwards here, but it's disabling the next button if my 3 buttons are in the normal state. And then what that means is if they haven't been clicked yet, it's going to make sure the button's disabled. Otherwise, it's going to enable it. So that covers any other state. So if they've been clicked or hovered or anything other than normal in that current state, they will then unlock the button as well. Flipping that around on the page itself, if I leave the page and come back, it's going to remember that I've clicked all these by remembering the button states as well. So I've gone up here, done the same thing. So it knows none of these buttons are set to normal anymore. It's going to activate my next button based on that as I go through. And rather than having to set up a whole new variable, I've gone in here and normally you have your variable list for your conditions. Yeah, you've also got the option to do things with pages and chapters, which we can look at in another session, but they've also added now this button section where I can select a button. I'm on different pages here. Call it button 1 and select which state I'm talking about. So you can have different things happen on the page based on whether a button's been visited or whatever else you want to do as well. So that's a pretty handy one there. Okay. Did we have any questions or anything from anyone on the button state stuff at all?
Anyone about the style painter. So can you use that across pages or only on the same page?
Yeah, so across pages, the main thing to remember with that is as soon as you click an object, it's going to try and apply it. So what you need to do is make sure you're using the Explorer here. So if I select this button, so it's a good example because I've got a copy of this page with the old states there still. So this one's got the blue. I'm going to go Style Painter. I'll make sure I move down to another page, pop it open, and then the next object you click needs to be the one that you want to change. So that's now applied to that there with the blue color. Whereas my number 2 still has the green as well. So yeah, you can go different pages as long as you're not clicking any objects in between those. So that's fine. Yeah, any other questions on that stuff? Everyone's happy with that? Well, I can do another thing further on Format Painter in another session if it's interesting. The Style Painter, sorry, as well, because that's pretty helpful for quickly editing things as well. All right, so button states is there. Let me jump back over here again. Outside of that, I've also got my preview stuff, which I'll make an error in a second to show you, but I'll go through all the different view states quickly, but we're focusing here on that preview in browser and sort of publishing with browser settings. So we've had a couple issues recently where things work differently in browsers. That's always been the case, where formatting or other things like that in a course in Chrome work differently from if you're using Edge or whatever else it is. It's just to do with the browsers themselves interacting with fonts and line spacing and things like that in different ways. So the code talks to the browser in a different way. So just to jump in for an example there, I've got another, I'll make an error with this page in a second and show you one of those options. But the view states themselves are either up here in the view tab. I'll go through each one. They're also right down the bottom of the screen. I usually use them here so I don't have to change whatever I'm doing. They're always down there at the bottom if you recognize the icons. So as far as the different modes, edit mode, obviously, that's when you're working on your course. You can't edit anything or adjust anything unless you're in edit mode. Run and preview are relatively the same. The main difference here is that if you go run mode, preview here, it's previewing my course. I can actually interact with stuff. I can click on things, but I also have my Project Explorer available on the left here. So a big thing for that, for testing in particular, if you're testing your navigation or if you haven't set up your navigation fully yet, but you want to test multiple pages, you don't have to worry about using the next and back buttons and all that sort of stuff. You can just jump to pages here and edit it that way. That's a little sneak peek for another page. So it's really good if there's an issue with your navigation maybe and you're testing that, you don't have to then get out of it, come back in, try to edit it that way. You've got full access to see what page you're on and what you're doing as well. A common thing there is to forget that you're in run mode and you try to make edits to something because you can see the page here, but if you look up the top, you can always spot that it's got the view modes there, and actually gives you a warning now, I think, when you try to edit stuff. I forget how to trigger that, but yeah, if I try to edit something, it's going to yell at me and say, hey, go back to edit mode. So it's pretty handy as well. Preview mode is pretty much the same as far as previewing the course, except that it goes in full screen. So most of the time, this is pretty much the same as what you're doing there. The differences are that you'll see the full background of the screen. So this is often just defaulting to white, but you may have a different background color, in which case it'll change the color of that as well. The viewable actual screen of the course is still locked to this shape here, but you can have sort of effects around it and things like that with colors as well. Or if it's an image background, it may fill in that whole background. The other thing there is if your course is at a size bigger than what you're sort of able to work with within Lectora. So if I'm if my screen itself is bigger than this sort of canvas window, it's a bit hard to preview in run mode because I have to scroll and I can't see my whole screen. Whereas if I go full screen preview, you'll get that full view of that as well. So that's handy for that as well. But otherwise, it works much the same as run mode. You can run back and forward through different pages. You can do all the same stuff there as well. I often just use run mode for everything. I'm rarely building a course with the screens bigger than what I can see, but if you've got zoomed in screens or smaller laptops and stuff like that, it can be handy as well. Debug, I'll do a little bit more on in a second on its own little page, but preview page in browser is the main one we're looking at here as well. The difference here is that you get to actually select which browser you want to preview in. Obviously, it'll just grab anything you've got installed. I can go Chrome. It'll pop up a little Chrome window for me. Oh, I was playing around with the page size. Move this around here, and it's just a preview in the browser as well. So you're not often going to see a big difference here, but things like formatting, and there's something we'll look at a bit later that might change as well, is important to see that, especially if you're doing a lot of things with line spacing or bullet points. Things like that can often change quite dramatically in different browsers because of the way that they handle those things. So it's good to just double check that it's going to work. Another big thing this is useful for is fonts. So if you're using custom fonts, you may have it embedded in a certain way in Lectora, but you want to test to see how it's going to work on different browsers or what default the browser is going to use, just to double check nothing's changing as well. So it's just good to be able to check that. and confirm that it's going to work, because the Lectora preview isn't a true sort of representation of what it's going to look like in the LMS on the browser as well. Only thing you need to remember with browser preview is that it's only doing one page at a time, because it's not actually publishing the course. It can't make the connections between pages. So you'll often get something like this where you try to change the page and it errors because it's not actually linking those pages together. So it's only one page at a time there. A little bit of a pain if you're trying to test full stuff with the course, but the alternative there as well is to actually publish the course just to HTML, and you can actually preview it locally and test it there. So I just wanted to show that process there as well. If I go up to publish, I can publish a web HTML version, do all your sort of error checks and everything else you want to do. Pop that open. Whatever settings you need to do. People often just have these set as a default thing. One thing I mentioned before about text of the page scaling is something you apply on publish. So I can actually turn the scaling on so it'll fill the window instead. I can show you what that looks like in a second. And I'll just publish this one. Only a quick course anyway. You can close it there and you can go out to find your Lectora folder where it'll actually create the HTML for you. I can show you where that is, but also you can just preview it directly from here when it's done. So if I again just pick a browser and go Chrome, it's going to fill there. The difference here is if I go full screen, I've set my scaling on, so it's going to keep resizing my screen, and vice versa. So this isn't the same as responsive design. You can see if I go like a really small screen, it's not changing like it would for a phone. It's just scaling it down, which is some other tools do as responsive. They just make sure it doesn't cut off. It's just going to resize instead. But this full screen field to view is really handy for a lot of courses as well. And you can now preview the whole course because I'm actually previewing the published version. It's not one page at a time. I can actually go through different pages, so I can test the different parts that I'm going to do whatever I need to do. I won't go to the next page because we'll see that in a second. I'll close that down. So depending on what you're doing with testing, that's just another way to test. Obviously, you can then go ahead and you can use Review Link or something else, and you can actually view it live on a browser. There is a slight difference between local viewing on a browser and actual live through a web server. Not often something you'll see completely different happening, but it is always best to test either directly in the LMS or fully published on a server as well, just to make sure things are working there. There is an offline publish option you can do, which is similar, but yeah, we don't need to sort of have a look at that. So yeah, that's the difference with the HTML and the preview stuff. So I'll show you a bit in a second to do with bullet points, and we may see how the browsers change there. So something you can do in testing, but those are the sort of different steps of testing anyway. Either just directly in Lectora, preview in browser, fully publish, and then obviously your LMS testing if you want to go all the way up to there for testing as well. Okay, last one I just want to quickly show you was debug mode. I did have a slide for that, but I'm just going to talk about it anyway. Moving over here, debug mode is really handy for tracking what's going on in your course. So any actions that happen, it'll flag what's happening and when. More importantly, things like variables, you'll see when they change and what's happening there. So if you've made a quite complex page, you can actually see if something's going wrong when you're testing it there as well. So I did make another page here just to make an error. Let me just jump in and change one of these options. Something simple, maybe not an actual error, but just something you've clicked the wrong way. When you're building it, often happens if you're copying and pasting stuff, you forget to go in and change one of them. So let's say I forgot to change this last one to which reveal it's going to work with. If I'm previewing this page, testing my course, I find that I can't get my reveal 3 to come up. I don't know why. If I go into my debug view, it'll work much the same as a run mode, except you get this little extra window here. And it looks a bit scary sometimes depending on what you're clicking on. But as you click on each thing, I'm going to have to keep bringing that back up. Yep, it's going to leave the screen. I normally have this on a different screen, but obviously previewing here for you on the screen recording. You can see a couple of things have happened here. As I've clicked stuff, it'll tell you what it's doing. So what actions have fired, it says. If an action's gone, it'll tell you that the actions have done what they're doing as they go. Bring this through. Obviously, a more complicated page would look a little bit more complicated, but it's telling me all the things that are happening. So you'll see if an action hasn't happened, which is a quick one to see. Often if there's a variable or something or a condition that's not met, you'll see that that doesn't come up. Looks like all of them are firing. So then from that, I can say it must be an issue with the actions itself, and you then look into what your actions are doing and see what's happening there as well. If it's anything to do with variables, it'll tell you what the variable's being changed to, what it's changed from, all that sort of stuff. It'll actually bring up a special little screen here. I've used the button conditions instead of variables, so you can't see them, but it'll tell you each variable in the course, what it's currently set to, and as it changes, it'll change, so you can track all that stuff as well. So yeah, debug mode's really handy for the more complex stuff when you get right into things like conditions and variables and all that kind of stuff. It does take a little bit to get used to what it's actually doing. But yeah, really handy for testing and previewing and stuff like that. Lost my Lectora here. When I bring it up on my little screen. Yeah, that's for debug mode, basically. This looks a lot more complicated when you've got really big pages happening, but nice and simple for this one. You can check each thing that's actually being clicked as well. This will change for each page, so if I go to another page, it'll refresh that and bring up the screen again as a restarted option as I click through each button. But really good for testing all your buttons and variables and actions and things as well. Hopefully you don't have issues that complex that you need to go into debug, but it's there for you when you need it to play around with as well. Yeah, so that's it for our sort of view modes. Does anyone have questions about those? Have anyone used debug mode before, or saw it and wondered what it was? Never looked at it?
Hi, Will.
Yep.
Sorry, it's Juliana here. Yeah, I've never used the debug, but I have definitely learned something new, and I will be most definitely using it, because I often get caught out when trying to figure out why a particular action is not happening. So I feel like that is going to be so helpful with understanding, like if your action's missing, or like you said, if a condition or something is broken and not firing, that is a game changer. And also, I'd never known when you just showed us a few minutes ago around how to preview and test the module within Lectora, because often you're right, you can only ever see the one screen. So when you click on run or preview, it only ever does that screen. But if you try to look for the next screen and see whether it moves on, it never does that. I never knew that by publishing HTML, you can actually view the whole thing in Lectora. That is, again, a time saver and a game changer for us. So brilliant stuff. I'm learning a lot.
That's good. That's what we want to hear. Yeah. No, I think that the local publish testing is probably something I do more often than not, because you don't want to have to go all the way up into the LMS and test it there. There's certain things that you won't see go wrong until it's in the LMS anyway, like coding and some of the variables and stuff. You won't actually see them happen until they're in the LMS, because the HTML doesn't really care about that stuff. But for formatting and other little fiddly things, it's really, really handy.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. This has been such an informative session. I tell you what.
No worries. All good. I think they're running a bit over time, but if everyone's still happy to stay on, we can keep going through. I'll jump through on to my next thing here, which was, I probably cover that quickly in a minute, but I did want to look at the page height stuff. So this is more of a, maybe a feature thing. They haven't added too much with this recently, but it's something they added in maybe 1 or 2 versions back that I don't think is used as often, to do with page height, scrolling pages and all that sort of stuff. So I just wanted to go through some of that. So the big thing here, which you've probably seen courses that are built completely like this, where rather than each page being a slide that you go through, click next, the whole screen sort of scrolls down through different things. It's something that people sort of started asking for as a style quite often, and not knowing how to sort of set it up. And it requires a couple of different things that you can work with. The big thing is sort of getting past the thinking of that Lectora page being this exact size. Everything has to fit on that page. If it doesn't, we've got to resize text or fiddle around with stuff to make it fit. You are free to resize that page. People are used to scrolling for content on websites and phones and other things like that. So it is a pretty common thing to work with. I've used this same sort of page I've set up with these buttons and reveals, but I've set it up in a way where the whole page actually goes down like this. So first step to do this sort of thing is your page properties itself. Normally on a normal page, if I jump back over here, we've got page size sort of blocked out. It's inheriting the general page size of the course, which you usually edit at the start. So if you've got a template, you may have a specific page size for your template. You'd work through it that way as well. For a particular page, you can select that page and untick that inherit box, and you're free to change either of these values as much as you want. So I've just popped in 2000 to just drop it down. You can obviously keep resizing that and fiddling with it however you want it to fit. And that gives you then that height to work with whatever you want. You can scroll down through it. You can work through it there as well. Couple things to sort of work with that, which Lectora does for us with some of these. Because I'm using one of the just general Lectora templates that are in there, it's actually set up so that my footer of my page automatically goes to the bottom of the page, no matter how high that page is. So I haven't had to grab that stuff and move it down. It's actually set to the position of the footer isn't based on the top of the screen, it's based on the bottom of the screen. So automatically, as I move my screen down size-wise, if I add another 500 on here, if I want, 2500, it resizes the page and my footer goes all the way down with it. So that's one really handy thing, and it's to do with the offsetting position. If I pop this open here, offset from bottom, basically, it just means it's dictating where that is based on the bottom of my screen, not the top, which is really handy. So that's my screen. I've got my height there, my footer's down the bottom. Also, you've got a number of actions and conditions that you can now use that are quite handy for some nice effects and things you can work with. So a couple of those is to do with the scroll position. You can actually have something trigger in Lectora based on when something scrolls into view. So if it hasn't appeared yet, it doesn't do anything. And when I scroll down, it then interacts with that. So what I've actually done with this is set my buttons down here and down here to appear when they're scrolled into view. So even though they're hidden, they are still there on the page in Lectora. And as I scroll down to where they would be, it then triggers them to appear as well. So it's kind of like a little sort of click and reveal, but it's a scroll and reveal, if that makes sense. And then I click my buttons to show my text. So just to show you what that looks like, I'll go to my preview. Here, I've just got some little effects to make it more fancy. Click on these and they reveal. As I scroll down, my little next button pops in. If I didn't apply that action to move on the scroll, these would just already be here when I scroll down, which you can also do as well, but this gives you the option to add those sort of effects in. You'll also see I've got these other little buttons here. I've actually set these buttons to scroll to different areas on the page, and it's based on an object on the page. So this one, for example, if I click here, it's actually jumped down to make sure that that button is the top of the screen. If I go up, it goes back to the top of the screen as well. So you can start adding navigation that way. So now that you're using a scrolling page, obviously it might be a pain to have to get all the way to the bottom again to click on something or do something. If you've already read it before, you can have these little shortcuts there as well. So jumping up and down. And that sort of stuff's been in there for a little while, like I said. So there's scrollable actions, which I can show you where they are, and the conditions as well. So let me see here. Where have I got it? Okay, so on show set state, jump to the bottom. These are actually just a go-to action, and it just goes to the current page, which normally would do nothing. It would just refresh the page, but you can tell it to scroll to a certain object, and it'll actually move itself down to fit with that. It's just refreshing and moving itself down as well. On these buttons here, I've also got actions. So on scroll, this is my scroll version. You can also have something happen when it scrolls out of view as well. So if you want to do the reverse, you can have things moving off the screen. When it scrolls into view, I've just triggered this object to show itself, basically. You could have something similar where you can also set invisible sort of points on the screen, and as they are scrolled into view, something else happens. So you can get that really sort of scrolling panoramic sort of effect of scrolling down and text comes in and stuff's revealed as you go through. Those sort of things they often do on websites. I know the Apple reveal always comes up with stuff like that where you scroll down and all this stuff happens. You can actually make a lot of that stuff work just directly in Lectora as well. So yeah, those are those scrolling options. Hopefully that makes sense. That was hopefully a quick one as well. Do anyone have questions on just page height stuff and things to do with scrolling as well? Okay.
Will I take it with those scrolling pages? I think that's really cool. As far as accessibility considerations go, that doesn't shift anything drastically there around the way screen readers behave and all of that sort of thing. It all still works just fine with that.
So to be the same rules that you'd have at the moment for accessibility, just to do with things hiding and showing, basically. Scrolling down on the page, if they're not actually doing those transitions, it's no problem. The screen reader can still get get down the page, if that makes sense. And it shouldn't affect that. Transitions and stuff are always a bit of a sore point with accessibility, whether or not to use them or how long they need to be and stuff like that as well. So if you do a lot of that fancy sort of transitioning stuff, it can be an issue, but that would be the same on any page, regardless of the page height stuff as well. But yeah, specifically the page height shouldn't be an issue. It should get down and do all that sort of stuff as well. It'll actually count for the scrolling as well. That's obviously dictated by the visible screen that you can see. But if you're using a screen reader and you're tabbing through objects, going down the screen counts as scrolling. So tabbing to an object that's further down will trigger that scroll effect as well. So if you are using that stuff, it'll still be in effect as well. Yeah. Alrighty. Hopefully that's sorry, we're pretty way over time on this one, but I just want to see a couple of things to do with that. I'll go back on here. The unused resources I just wanted to quickly show, because that's a one that I often have come up and help people with as well. So just the main thing with this stuff, you've got your resources in Lectora. So if I go to my tools here, I've got my resources area. This is to do with anything, images, audio, documents, anything else you've got in the course will sit in this resource manager. As you add things into Lectora, they automatically go into the resource area. As you know, the Lectora files have these separate folders, which I can actually open one of them up and show you where that stuff is. But what that means is that if you add an image and then you delete it off the screen, it's still sitting in the resource manager. So that can actually end up being an issue later on where you're publishing a course or you're working with a course file and it's just huge. The file size is blown way out and you can't figure out why. Maybe someone's put a video in and then there's been 4 iterations of that video. The other 3 are still sitting in the resource manager. So if it's a 1 gig video, you've got 4 or 5 gig of your course sitting there in unused stuff as well. So what you can do in the resource manager here is go to this little tab that says unused, and it'll show you anything that's been in the course before, but not actually there. I just added some random stuff in just to have stuff in there because I didn't actually have any images in this one. Puppies there, other stuff there, but it says how many pages or objects are using that item. And in this case, anything in this tab is going to have that as 0. So no pages have this content on them. You don't actually need them. No actions are interacting with this at all. So they're not there and they're not needed. So you can go in here and you can remove them. So remove all and it clears them out. That clears them out if you're going to publish, which is fine. But the actual file of your course still has them sitting there. So if I bring that up over on the other side here, just bring up my desktop support. Here's my Lectora course that I'm working on. When I publish my HTML, comes up here. I've also got my images folder. All that sort of stuff lives in here. Inside your images folder for this Lectora course, pop that open. I've still got anything I've used there before. So company logo, the dogs are there, the little buttons are there, everything's still sitting in there. So what you need to do is, if you want to sort of clear out the course fully, a quick step that I often do, which is also a really good bug fixer, just if anything's funny going on with the course, I go into resources, clear unused like I've just done, and then I go to file, export, and I export a zip of the course. It'll go in the same spot. It'll usually just pop itself in that same folder. Export that to zip. I've closed my folder again. Let me just bring that back up. Desktop. Pop that open. And I've now got a zip folder sitting here as well, which is the zip of that entire course. Now, what you can do is take that zip folder, unzip it so it's just a normal folder, and treat that as your new Lectora folder for that course. So it creates a clean, fresh version of that course. Sometimes you may want to do that if it's a sort of new iteration, you've done changes, made edits, and you want to call it V2 or something. That can be your V2 rather than just copying and saving the whole folder or saving as. This is probably a cleaner way to do that sort of thing as well. So that new zip folder, if I unzip that into its own little folder, that's now basically just what's in the course, just the AWT, no other crap, no other stuff, sorry. Images, nothing else in there. It's only what's actually sitting in the course itself. And that's something if something is going on in the course, that's my first step, no matter what, without even checking what else is going on, just get a clean version of the course to look at. We often have something support-wise where someone says a weird issue is happening. We get them to send us the course, and in order to send us the course, they have to export a zip and send us the zip. I get the course, look at it, nothing's wrong, can't see a problem at all. because zipping it itself has fixed the problem. And then I can just say, hey, that one you just sent me, I don't even need to send it back. Just open the one you sent me. It's already fixed. So it's a really good tip for fixing stuff like that. File size is one thing, but also weird buggy stuff, text formatting stuff. If anything's going weird, you can fix it up that way as well. Really handy one to cover off that as well. I think we can call it there if everyone's okay for that. Otherwise, if there's any other little funny issues, we normally sort of try at the end to bring them up if anyone has any questions or something they want us to cover for next time. We can have a look at that stuff as well. I'll bring up my sort of Q&A thing there, or our support screen. But our support email, if you need to send us anything or have a look at anything through there as well. But yeah, if there's anything you want us to look at for next month, if you want to jump on again, if you want to look more at any of the stuff we looked at today, we're available for that as well. So yeah, just let us know if there's anything quick you want to look at now. Otherwise, we can lock something in for next time and start setting that up as well. Cool. Sounds good.
No, looks like it's all good.
Good.
So yes, just a reminder, these are for you. If there's anything you think of that you want Will to show you in the next session, please send it through to support@itclearning.com.au, and we'll add that to the next session. Yeah, I hope everyone has a fantastic day. And as discussed at the start, we'll look at cleaning this up a little bit and putting it up somewhere so that those that didn't turn up or want to rewatch it can view it.